What if the church had always known that the giants of ancient myth were real? The silence that has existed for ages is broken by just one query. These are not merely bedtime stories or folk tales that have been forgotten and are hushed in the shadows of old buildings. Scripture, authentic writings composed thousands of years ago, is the source of them. Texts that were buried, outlawed, or deleted. They spoke too much, not because they were untrue. Those same scriptures were never lost in Ethiopia's highlands. Undisturbed, they wait, awaiting anyone with the courage to inquire as to why Western powers were so anxious to keep them quiet. An unflinching version of history can be found in the pages of the Ethiopian Bible. It describes a time when creatures from other planets came down from the sky. Watchers, fallen ones, who disobeyed divine rule, not golden-robed angels strumming harps. They seized the daughters of man and fathered offspring that went beyond the laws of nature. Nephilim, giants, monsters with fearsome appetite and immense strength. These were not metaphorical beings, these were human beings. Additionally, their stories were not changed to be symbolic in locations like Ethiopia. Warnings were all that remained of them. This begs the issue once more. Why was this account taken out of the Bibles that most people read as children? Why won't Western churches discuss it? Why did America and Europe promote a form of Christianity that buried the truth and kept the giants out? Once treasured by early Christians, the Book of Enoch was deemed too perilous. In addition to describing giants, it also explains their origins, the harm their fathers caused to humanity, and the judgment that would await them. It questions the sanitized, polished version of Scripture that millions are fed, and it is both detailed and unvarnished. Ethiopia, however, retained it, kept it safe, protected it. Even now, the Ethiopian Orthodox Church still reads from a Bible that is deeper, longer, and more unsettling than anything found in pews in the West. Because the conflict between heaven and the fallen is not concealed by it. The prohibited offspring are not eliminated by it. The cost of their insurrection is not disregarded. You come to understand that this was never merely a religious issue after reading what is mentioned in that book. It has to do with control, authority, over the information that people are permitted to know. Authority over the definition of truth. Because everything changes if the Nephilim were genuine. Contrary to what we were taught, the distinction between the spiritual and the physical is not as clear. Stories of sky gods, enormous megaliths, and ancient ruins, none of it seems so far-fetched these days. Perhaps the legends of giants would have persisted if they had ever set foot on Earth. Perhaps they have just been imprisoned, one passage after another that has been censored. Why would someone keep such a potent tale buried unless they were afraid of what it would reveal? This is the channel for you if you're prepared to keep tugging at the thread they didn't want to come loose. Subscribe to the Ethiopian Bible, hit the bell symbol, and don't miss what's coming. This has nothing to do with amusement. It's important to remember this, about getting back what they attempted to destroy. And please leave a remark if you've ever wondered what the giants really desired from us. Share your opinions with us. While the truth still exists. Simply said, it was concealed in the one spot they didn't believe anyone would check. A meeting was convened in the skies, far above the ground and out of human sight, not by people, prophets, no. However, by angels, strong creatures intended to carry out the will of the Most High. These were not the angels that most people think of, glowing messengers clad in golden light, singing as they descended. The Watchers were these, tasked with protecting humanity and providing unhindered guidance. They did not, however, continue to obey. Something sinister surged inside them as they observed the daughters of men from a distance, led by a man named Semjaza, a desire that turned into a fixation. The Ethiopian Bible preserves the Book of Enoch, which speaks fearlessly and unfiltered. Enoch 6 tells the story of how it started. Sensing the seriousness of their situation, Semjaza summoned the others to Mount Hermon. It was more than simply a location. It served as the backdrop for the biggest uprising the planet has witnessed since the collapse. Semjaza made them take an oath because he was afraid he would act alone. 200 angels were bound by that agreement to accomplish something that had never been done before, cross the boundary between heaven and earth, to receive rather than to shine. Imagine a bright storm that is coming down from the sky with a purpose rather than being chaotic, with a presence that would tremble the earth. Divine figures shrouded in radiance landed on the slopes of Mount Hermon. They must have appeared like gods to mortals, beings of unparalleled beauty and strength. But there was rebellion underneath that beauty, a hunger. Thunder and flames did not accompany their tremendous fall. There was silence, calculated, selected. They came to assert, not to instruct or encourage. The Book of Enoch states, "Let us select wives from among the children of men." And they did. Not a single one or two. As they saw fit, they took them. These were not love marriages. These were dominance behaviors, bound by divine rule, angels, violated in front of the world they were supposed to defend. What started out as yearning evolved into a corruption of the very act of creation. The children they had with human women were not your typical offspring. Nephilim, giants with superhuman power and unholy hunger, are what the books referred to them as. However, the mere act of their genesis ripped through the spiritual fabric before their hideous children started to devour the planet. Women weren't the only target of the Watchers. They imparted prohibited knowledge to humanity, including astrology, magic, weaponry, root cutting, and enchantments. It was knowledge that twisted and destroyed the natural order, not wisdom from above. Enlightenment was not achieved. It was poison. Not only does this story have a supernatural scope, but it also feels like a violation, which is what makes it so horrifying. They served as protectors. They were meant to keep us safe. Rather, they succumbed to pride, power, and lust. With their own hands, they set fire to the bridge that connected heaven and earth. The Watchers committed the transgression that permanently altered the course of history. This is still not taught in the majority of Western churches. The Book of Enoch is not opened by them. They don't mention Mount Hermon, Semjaza, or the agreement that restrained angels from rebelling. However, this tale has persisted in Ethiopian literature. It was protected, revered, and avoided. Because mythology isn't what this is. It documents the results of divine beings breaking the chain of servitude and pursuing what was never theirs. This tale had a lasting impact, because everything of humanity's knowledge of its past, including its conflicts, battles, and old civilizations, needs to be re-examined if the Watchers indeed descended and their offspring lived on Earth. Giants don't appear out of thin air. Angels also don't revolt without repercussions. The bleak story continues in Enoch 7. The Nephilim became so big and vicious that they ate everything, including humans, animals, and crops. The weight of their carnage caused the earth to scream. What began as passion turned into a sickness, and it all started with a single decision, a moment when celestial beings chose to take what wasn't theirs after looking down and seeing beauty. The world was never supposed to forget this tale. Not because it's dramatic, but because it clarifies why there has always been chaos in human history, why power has always been followed by disaster, and why certain ancient knowledge seems too sophisticated, odd, or deadly to track. The Watchers were the source, and they weren't the only ones that fell. Generation after generation was affected. They had a wonderful appearance. They did, however, carry revolt, and everything was altered by what they created. The world has never witnessed anything like the birth of the Nephilim. Think of a kid born from a marriage that defied heaven and earth, half mortal, part divine, wholly belonging to neither universe but divided between two. They were giants, rising above the highest trees, their eyes blazing with an unnatural light that reflected the evil force that awoke inside them. These were no ordinary youngsters. Their hunger, which no common food could sate, reverberated through the valleys and mountains as their footsteps shook the ground beneath them. Imagine a mother in a tiny village, her hands shaking as she holds her newborn. Fear and love are at odds in her heart. Unlike other babies, this child, her own, flesh and blood, does not cry. Rather, his cries, which are too intense and deep to be those of a typical child, appear to tremble the air itself. His teeth are sharp as swords, his fingers are like claws, and even when he's sleeping, his body throbs with a force that frightens her. She wonders, what has been born into my arms, as she sees his eyes flare in the moonlight? What is the destiny of this child? In contrast to the quiet found in most Western Bibles, the Ethiopian Bible, which was written in the old Ge'ez language, contains detailed accounts of these giants known as the Nephilim. These stories describe monstrous and ferocious beasts who felled trees with a single swipe, ripped through woods, and left entire villages in their wake. In addition to their strength, the Nephilim had a fierceness that made them predators that were unmatched by humans. They initially chased deer, oxen, and even untamed animals that ran away when they got close. However, as they increased in size and power, so did their appetite. Animals soon stopped satisfying them. The Nephilim looked toward people. People have been pulled from their homes and villages have vanished overnight, according to horrifying tales that have been passed down. Whole towns surrounded themselves in terror of these enormous creatures, and mothers warned their children in whispers. However, the Nephilim's appetite was unquenchable. They ate everything, including people, animals, and even one another. According to Ethiopian texts, their own relatives succumbed to their heinous cravings, causing anarchy and seemingly unending devastation. This cannibalism was more than simply a gory detail. It was evidence of how the natural order itself was distorted by the unholy union that produced them. Here, the narrative reaches a sinister crescendo. For reasons that many academics disagree with, the Western Bible is silent. After a brief mention of the giants, the story continues. However, the Ethiopian canon does not mince words. It maintains the memory of a world engulfed by the hideous descendants of fallen angels adhering to these horrifying tales. Ge'ez texts describe the giants' devastation with eerie clarity, describing fires, floods, and heavenly fury that finally aim to rid the planet of their awful existence. But the Nephilim's mark is still there. Their impact persisted long after their corporeal bodies vanished, according to the old Ethiopian texts. In the traditions that hint of giants who once dominated the land, in the deep valleys and in the bizarre ruins, the ground itself remembers the scars they left behind. Giants weren't the only thing that brought the Nephilim into the world. It was the beginning of a nightmare that was beyond human comprehension or control. These creatures represented the collision of heaven and earth, the twisting of divine force into devastation. The Ethiopian Bible is a monument to this forgotten fact, which compels us to reevaluate the fundamental causes of human history, terror, and survival, even if the majority of religious writings from around the world have silently gone past this chapter. The planet was no longer the tranquil, flourishing place it had been. It appeared to bleed under the weight of corruption, which swept the globe like a sinister plague. Once pure and transparent, rivers now flowed heavy with blood, tainting the soil scarlet and contaminating the air with a metallic, unpleasant odor. The sounds of rustling leaves and soft bird songs that should have filled the forests were replaced by strange screams and the agitated motions of deranged animals. Once benign and vibrant, animals started to change into dreadful creatures, with hideous shapes and primitive tendencies. The earth itself appeared to moan beneath the weight of this corruption, upsetting the natural equilibrium. Humanity was not spared in this mayhem. People prayed in terror and desperation as they screamed to the sky, unable to comprehend the darkness. Infiltrating their homes and hearts, they confronted a world coming apart. But it wasn't just nature that had been tainted. The very talents and knowledge that ought to have created civilizations had been turned into destructive instruments. The fallen angels who had come to Earth, known as the Watchers, taught people forbidden techniques that brought destruction, rather than advancement. They taught mankind how to make weapons and bleed their brother's blood, bringing with them the fatal knowledge of combat. They exposed dark magic and sorcery, luring humanity into a realm of deceit and darkness. Even worse, the Watchers fostered arrogance and conceit, poisoning people's hearts with a desire for supremacy and power. By transforming the natural cycle of life into a brutal procedure that separated the defenseless from the womb, they taught the secrets of abortion. Secrets intended to stay concealed in the heavens were turned into weapons against creation itself, causing forbidden knowledge to leak out into the world. The world seemed to descend into anarchy with each human step. One could feel the pain of the land, as though the stones and dirt themselves were screaming in pain. With a ferocity that reflected the grief and wrath of a betrayed creation, the mountains shook, rivers roared, and storms ravaged the landscapes. As if the heavens themselves were lamenting the loss of their once ideal world, the skies grew gloomy. Even the rules of nature appeared to be twisted by the extent and depth of the corruption. The equilibrium between development and decay, life and death, had been upset. There had to be a response to this unrelenting evil spread. The divine endurance that had made creation possible was now wearing thin. God was so distraught about the destruction of his handiwork that his heart broke, a holy indignation that would tremble. The sky was sparked by the earth's and her children's mute cries. It was judgment time, a reckoning that would bring the order that had been upended by the Watchers and their hideous children's rebellion back. A prompt and uncompromising response came from the highest realms. The responsibility of enforcing divine justice fell to God's archangels, powerful, luminous beings. These archangels were more than just messengers. They were celestial warriors with the power to battle the evil that had corrupted the planet. The age of kindness was coming to an end, and the age of conflict was starting, as evidenced by their plummet. This was a pivotal event in time. A cosmic conflict between light and evil, between divine intent and corrupted rebellion, was put in motion. They would judge the Watchers and their children. The world shuddered in terror and hope as it waited for redemption. The outcome would determine whether creation itself was purified and restored or allowed to wither in the shadow of disobedience. The tale of the Nephilim and the Watchers transcends beyond outdated legend or lost scripture in this epic unfolding. It exposes a conflict between chaotic corruption and sacred order at the core of life. The epic chapter that reshapes our understanding of the causes of evil and the unwavering hope for redemption is composed of the earth's screams, the divine response, and the impending conflict. God sent his strongest archangels, Michael, Raphael, Uriel, and Gabriel, to carry out divine vengeance when the degradation of the planet reached a breaking point. Entrusted with a holy mission to confront the fallen Watchers who had disobeyed the heavenly order and tainted creation itself, these were no ordinary messengers. They were celestial warriors, the most powerful of heaven's hosts. The skies would no longer stand the degradation caused by those once loved angels who had abandoned their mission, as evidenced by their appearance. With unflinching determination, Michael, the great leader, led the charge. Known as God's people's guardian, his job was to restrain the disobedient Watchers so they could no longer cause havoc. He was accompanied by Raphael, the protector and healer, who was ready to rid the planet of the physical and spiritual scars caused by the fallen angels. Gabriel, the messenger of revelation, carried the decrees that would seal the fate of the transgressors, while Uriel, the light of God's wisdom, offered heavenly insight to the proceedings. Collectively, these archangels swooped with strength and authority, searching for the watchers who had taken refuge in the earth's deepest recesses. To lock these perverted creatures far below the surface, where their influence could no longer harm both the natural world and humanity, was their obvious mission. Once shining in the heavens like stars, these fallen angels were now imprisoned in a prison of stone and darkness, shackled by the will of God. The ground itself appeared to engulf them, a suitable resting place for those responsible for causing such destruction. However, the Watchers' incarceration was not the only consequence of the ruling. God had a much bigger plan to purge the earth. The impending flood was supposed to be a cleansing wave that would eradicate the bloodshed, corruption, and giants that roamed the land. The flood was a cruel but necessary act to bring equilibrium back to a world overrun by evil. It was more than just a natural tragedy. Enoch, a man selected by God for a special and crucial function, stood in the middle of this celestial play. Enoch, in contrast to others, was given the unique opportunity to act as a scribe and mediator between heaven and earth. He had a pure heart and a spirit that was tuned into the heavens. Enoch was entrusted with documenting the proceedings, rulings, and edicts made by the archangels. More significantly, he developed into the voice that served as a conduit between two worlds in conflict, carrying messages from the defiant Watchers to the Holy Throne. The most tragic scene in this story occurred when Semjaza, the Watchers' leader, begged for forgiveness through Enoch. Semjaza, defeated and bound, pleaded for pity in a voice full of remorse and despair. He pleaded with God to pardon him and his followers and to reevaluate the severe punishment. This request was more than simply a private scream. It was the pinnacle of the angelic uprising, the point at which defiance and mercy collided. But the heavens were unwavering. God's decision was definitive. Semjaza made a sincere request for forgiveness, but it was turned down. The betrayal was too profound, and the corruption they had let loose was too tremendous. This denial served as both a punishment and a statement that the cosmic order could not be overturned by any sin, no matter how terrible, and that divine law must be obeyed. The Watchers' downfall served as a sobering reminder that defiance of heavenly power only results in disaster. The pivotal moment in this cosmic battle was the Watchers' captivity and the preparation for the flood. The verdict from the sky was unmistakable: justice would be done. The land would be cleansed by a flood, and the wounds of this revolt would be remembered but not repeated in the future. There is more to this part of the Nephilim and the Watchers' myth than just an old-fashioned punishment scenario. It is the potent culmination of a cosmic conflict between obedience and disobedience, light and darkness, order and chaos. The decisions made at these times would have a lasting impact on history, influencing not only the fate of humanity, but also the definition of good and evil in religious tradition. Enoch is a witness in the midst of this divine justice, serving as a reminder that even in the most dire circumstances, a messenger has been chosen to uphold the truth, make sure that the tale of the fallen Watchers is never lost, and keep the hope for restoration alive. The giant's offspring of the Watchers, illicit mating with human women, known as the Nephilim, became acutely aware of their approaching doom as the weight of heavenly judgment approached. These enormous creatures, who had previously ruled the planet out of sheer power and fear, were now in risk of a fate more terrible than death: complete destruction. In addition to eradicating humanity's crimes, the floodwaters also vowed to eradicate these giants' mere existence. Many of the Nephilim looked for desperate ways to avoid the impending judgment when faced with this dire possibility. Compared to the sanitized accounts found in most Western books, Ethiopian legends provide a fuller and darker picture of the latter days of the Nephilim. Oral histories and old Ge'ez texts indicate that the giants did not just accept their annihilation. Rather, they used their guile to impart to humanity knowledge that was prohibited to them, knowledge that would enable them to evade detection, survive, and possibly even evade death itself. In the hopes that these monuments would act as havens or entryways to safety, they gave men instructions to erect imposing buildings that could reach the sky. Echoing the biblical tale of Babel, these enormous towers were more than just works of construction. They were emblems of disobedience to the will of God. But their strategy was not just about building upwards. Underground shelter was also sought by the Nephilim. Some giants sought refuge in caves and secret caverns, digging well below the surface of the ground to avoid the flooding. According to Ethiopian religion, these underground lairs served as both hiding places and entryways to other realms, bridging the gap between the spiritual and material worlds. They claim that the sound of their footsteps can still be heard in these shadowy areas, serving as a terrifying reminder of their valiant efforts to avoid punishment. In addition, the Nephilim's pursuit of immortality was well known. They taught people unlawful wizardry that promised to prolong life or even grant eternal existence, as well as hidden rites and occult arts. According to Ethiopian Christian tradition, these pernicious beliefs degraded humanity by instilling in people conceit, arrogance, and abnormal cravings. Beyond their physical presence, the Nephilim had a profound impact, sowing the seeds of evil that would last long after their bodies were gone. Ethiopian Christian belief is based on this link between the Nephilim and the spiritual world. It is believed that these giant spirits did not merely disappear after they died, but instead changed into evil beings known as demons that still plague people today. Ethiopian tradition holds that many demons are the restless souls of the Nephilim, chained to the earth by their unresolved rebellion and fury, in contrast to Western Christianity, which frequently sees demons as fallen angels themselves. This idea clarifies why there is still evil in the universe, and why good and evil are constantly at odds. Envision, then, a potent scenario from these old tales: a dying giant, unfathomably large, lying amid the wreckage of a destroyed planet. His wounded and bleeding form, which once towered over trees and mountains, curses the skies with a cry that trembles the ground. He vows to get revenge with his last breath, not only against God, but also against the human race's heirs to the planet. His words, a promise to haunt humanity forever and to sow chaos and fear till the end of time, reverberate through the ages like thunder. More than just a tale, this curse is a spiritual power that permeates Ethiopian biblical history. It is a worldview in which the effects of past sins are felt for generations to come, and the spiritual and material worlds are intricately entwined. The giants' futile attempt to evade judgment did not save them, but it did leave a grim legacy that calls into question humanity's fortitude and faith. Accordingly, the pre-flood tale of the Nephilim is about a cosmic struggle for immortality, power, and wisdom as much as physical survival. It shows how these creatures attempted to control creation itself in order to escape their doom despite being fallen and damned. Their attempts to construct towers and hide in caves represent the human propensity to push boundaries and evade responsibility. Their spirits turning into demons is a warning. If evil is not faced and vanquished, it will continue to exist in different forms, perpetuating the cycle of desperation and corruption. However, the Ethiopian tradition also provides hope in the midst of this gloom. The same texts that describe the rebellion and fall of the Nephilim also describe the restoration and mercy of God. Even though the flood was terrible, it was a necessary purification and an opportunity for the world to be born again. The giants' abortive attempts to flee serve as a reminder that, in the end, heavenly justice triumphs over all rebellions. Despite being horrifying, their curses and lingering spirits are a part of a greater narrative in which humanity is urged to acknowledge evil, fight against its influence, and work toward redemption. This section of the Nephilim narrative forces us to reconsider old legends and acknowledge the deep spiritual lessons ingrained in Ethiopian biblical culture. It challenges us to consider the nature of evil, the boundaries of power, and the long-term effects of decisions taken in the past. We discover a tale that speaks to the core of human existence and the never-ending conflict between light and darkness as we investigate these riddles. The giants' attempts to evade judgment thus became a potent emblem of defiance and desperation as the floodwaters rose. Their legacy, which is preserved in Ethiopian scripture, serves as a reminder that some facts were kept secret because they were too profound and unpleasant for many people to confront, rather than because they were just stories. We can only fully comprehend the depths of the ancient battle that shaped the world we live in today by facing these realities. The Book of Enoch, a holy book that the Ethiopian Orthodox Church zealously upheld while the Western Church rejected, is a tale of extraordinary survival and tragic loss. The teachings of this old document were hidden under layers of silence and distrust, and it was lost to the Western world for centuries. In the meantime, monks in the interior of Ethiopia meticulously preserved and reproduced the Book of Enoch in the Ge'ez language, making sure that its potent lessons would not be forgotten. The book did not reappear until the 18th century, when European researchers and adventurers unearthed the ancient Ge'ez manuscripts, revealing to the world a work that had been suppressed for years. Both academics and believers were taken aback by this rediscovery, which begged the urgent question of why the Book of Enoch was excluded from Western canon. Fear of the supernatural worldview that Enoch offers, a vision more darker and more nuanced than the sanitized tales many had become accustomed to, is part of the solution. The Book of Enoch plainly reveals the presence of angels who fall, rebel, and contaminate the earth, in contrast to the Western Bible, which frequently glosses over the celestial realm. It demonstrates that sin has profoundly cosmic roots, and that wickedness is not merely a human weakness, but rather something that originated in the heavens. The Western Church's established order was called into question by this revelation, since the notion of disobedient angels and their violent progeny was perceived as a danger to the meticulously kept theological narrative. The Church was concerned that embracing such a viewpoint would call into question divine justice or diminish human responsibility. This led to the Book of Enoch being dismissed as apocryphal and finally removed from the European and American canon of biblical texts. Ethiopia, however, had a different perspective. The Book of Enoch was accepted by the Ethiopian Orthodox Church because it revealed hidden facts regarding the nature of angels, the cosmic conflict between light and darkness, and the beginnings of evil. The book is more than simply old history. To Ethiopian Christians, it is a live testament to their identity and faith and a revered window into the secrets of the cosmos. It is impossible to overestimate the emotional impact of this preservation. What else has been obscured or removed from the Christian mainstream? How many holy truths have vanished only because they went against the grain of authority or custom? The narrative of the Book of Enoch forces us to consider the notion that both those who seek truth and those who are afraid of it have shaped history, particularly spiritual history. A better comprehension of the biblical cosmos, in which angels are active participants in the creation and destruction drama rather than only remote messengers, is made possible by this lost and found scripture. It compels us to reevaluate evil and perceive it as a cosmic force that has influenced the world's destiny rather than just a human shortcoming. Perhaps most poignantly, it serves as a reminder that the truths we believe to be lost may actually still be out there, ready to be found because of the courageous people who kept the flame burning when others attempted to put it out. The Book of Enoch continues to shine brightly in Ethiopia's serene monasteries, a tribute to the tenacity of religion and the never-ending pursuit of truth. We are prompted to consider what additional secrets might be hidden beneath the surface of conventional wisdom, awaiting people who have the guts to unearth them and bring their light to the world as we reflect on the path of this ancient text. From rejection to preservation. Amidst today's spiritual turmoil, the age-old tale of giants, fallen angels, and cosmic revolt is not merely a relic from the past. The effects of this age-old conflict are evident everywhere we look. Pride fueling unending separation, occult practices luring millions, violence tearing apart communities, and corruption seeping into governments. Might it be that we have never really been abandoned by the ghosts of the Nephilim, the imposing giants that were born out of prohibited unions? Ethiopian custom dictates that the answer is yes. After dying, these spirits, once the earth-eating giants made of flesh and blood, became restless and changed into demons that still plague people. They fuel our daily spiritual conflicts by spreading lies, igniting fear, and corrupting people's hearts. This knowledge is intricately integrated throughout Ethiopian religion. Their evil endures in a dark, invisible realm, affecting the living through demonic energies. The fallen Nephilim did not just disappear with the flood. This spiritual heritage establishes a direct link between the current battles and the historic insurrection on Mount Hermon. Innumerable manifestations of the corrupting influences taught by the Watchers, war, vanity, and forbidden knowledge, continue to reverberate in the contemporary world. You might be experiencing the residual influence of those old giants who were transformed into demons when you hear tales of possession, spiritual oppression, or overpowering temptation. The idea that many people have already heard these voices, without realizing it, is what makes this even more disturbing. The faint echoes of the Nephilim's evil influence might be the subliminal messages that promote envy, avarice, or hopelessness. According to the Ethiopian Bible, these spirits are cunning and patient, working in the background to divert people's attention from light and truth. For every one of us, it poses a potent question. How many times have we been seduced or tricked by forces that are far older and more sinister than we had anticipated? This is a call to awareness rather than terror. Understanding that the spiritual war is still going on enables us to comprehend the causes of the unrest in our world and prepares us to fight back using knowledge, courage, and faith rather than physical weapons. Even though the ancient giants have fallen, their narrative is far from over, and their ghosts continue to roam. You may already be dealing with the effects of the Nephilim's curse if you have ever experienced an invisible force, a pull toward darkness, or an inexplicable terror. Our current spiritual struggles are reframed when we comprehend this historical conflict. It challenges us to be steadfast, to look for truth outside of what the world offers, and to recover the light that was long since taken away by rebellion. Even if the giants are no longer there, their devils continue to whisper. Will you pay attention? And what will you do next? Much of the Western civilization has either forgotten or was never intended to fully grasp the profound reality that Enoch's message conveys. Fundamentally, the Book of Enoch shows that judgment is an impending and inevitable reality rather than a far-off, abstract idea. Beyond human sin, evil is considerably more widespread and profound than most people realize. It even extends to celestial realms where angels previously walked in brightness, but instead decided to rebel. However, there is a strong summons to righteousness inside this terrible reality, one that requires every individual to choose between salvation and destruction. Enoch's story is one of heavenly favor and optimism, in contrast to the Watchers, those fallen angels who came down from heaven and caused chaos on earth. Enoch persisted in his faith and obedience while the Watchers disobeyed God's command, corrupting people and causing strife. The potential to rise above the darkness that has surrounded the planet since the beginning of time is symbolized by his climb into heaven. This contrast is a living lesson about the power of choice and the ensuing repercussions. It is not just a piece of ancient folklore. The Book of Enoch has been preserved in the Ge'ez language by the Ethiopian Orthodox Church for generations, protecting this potent message. Ethiopia accepted this text as sacred scripture, but Western Christianity rejected it and took it out of the biblical canon, possibly because they were afraid of facing the disturbing realities about the cosmic origins of evil and celestial rebellion. This guardianship preserved an understanding of reality that pushes believers to look past the obvious in scripture and history. Enoch's trip is an opportunity to change rather than just a warning story. Humans can overcome sin, corruption, and despair, as demonstrated by his relationship with God, his work as a scribe and intercessor, and his eventual ascent into the skies. It teaches that there is always a way to find light and atonement, regardless of how gloomy the world gets. When we think about the spiritual conflicts that are going on all around us right now, conflicts not just with evils that are readily seen, but also with forces that are invisible but whisper lies and corruption, this message becomes even more pressing. The tale of Enoch serves as a warning that evil originates not just from within people, but also from cosmic forces that shape the course of history. We are urged by his example to acknowledge these forces and make an active decision to uphold virtue. In the end, Enoch's revelation forces us to make a decision. Will we, like the Watchers, give in to arrogance, disobedience, and devastation? Or will we follow in Enoch's footsteps and embrace obedience, humility, and divine purpose? This is a spiritual crossroads that every individual must traverse, not just a religious one. The fact that Ethiopia has preserved this message serves as a reminder that the truth cannot be permanently suppressed. It waits patiently, giving those who are ready to listen and choose life over death, light over darkness, hope, and a path forward. Think about your own journey as you contemplate this old tale. Enoch's message is still relevant today, urging us all to wake up, comprehend the seriousness of judgment, and welcome the prospect of emerging from the shadows. A timeless conflict between revolt and redemption that continues to play out in people's lives. It is an urgent call to join something bigger. You have an option. It's crucial to stop and consider the amazing tale we've discovered together as our adventure draws to an end. We have uncovered layers of history and scripture that many have attempted to conceal or forget, from the rebellious descent of the Watchers, those angels who disobeyed the divine order, to the terrifying birth of the Nephilim giants that shook the earth, and finally to the flood that attempted to purge the corruption. This is not merely an old narrative, it has a direct bearing on the spiritual conflicts that are currently taking place in our world. The turmoil that was initially unleashed when those celestial beings crossed prohibited bounds is now echoed in civilization by acts of violence, deceit, pride, and secret forces. However, beneath the surface of this story lurks a more profound and disturbing query. What more have they concealed from you? What further insights are hidden if so many aspects of the Western biblical heritage have been stripped of such profound truths as the causes of evil, the character of spiritual conflict, and the cosmic conflict between good and evil? This question challenges us all to take a closer look at the forces influencing our contemporary world, as well as at ancient texts. It pushes us to look for truth outside of what we've been taught and to confront narratives that seem sanitized or lacking. Texts like the Book of Enoch, which have been preserved in the Ethiopian Bible, provide insight into knowledge that was once widely known but has since been suppressed. It serves as a reminder that the powerful frequently write history and that real understanding necessitates having the guts to confront difficult truths. The decision we make today, whether to ignore, reject, or challenge these forces, will influence not only our individual lives, but also the course of human history. The spiritual struggle is still going on, Please like this video to show your support if this tale has touched you and you think the truth can no longer be kept buried in the shadows. To ensure you don't miss what comes next, hit the bell button and subscribe to the Ethiopian Bible channel. We have a lot more to tell, including the prophecy of a black kingdom emerging from the south and the incredible tale of the Tower of Babel. Everything you believe will be called into question by these tales. We'd like to hear from you. Now, do you think the Nephilim's souls still have an impact on society today? Why not? Leave a comment below with your opinions. Your voice contributes to this ongoing discussion, which touches on the essence of our spiritual reality and transcends history and the Bible. Keep in mind that this is about more than just forgotten angels or ancient giants. It's about choosing to stand on the side of light, realizing the struggles waged in invisible worlds, and realizing the truth concealed in plain sight. Together, we will reveal what has long been concealed and why it is more important now than ever. The adventure is only getting started.